The young bird steps out of the nest box for the first time. It's maybe 28 days old, still has some down feathers mixed with the flight feathers that are just finishing development. Its eyes are bright, curious, uncertain. It looks around the loft, sees the other birds, the perches, the feeders, the trap door that leads to the outside world. Everything is new. Everything is uncertain. And in the next 10 days, you will either set this bird on the path to becoming a successful racer, or you will create problems that might never be fully corrected. Most fanciers don't understand how critical these first 10 days are. They think training starts later, after birds are fully developed, after they're strong flyers. They're wrong. Training starts the moment a young bird leaves the nest. The experiences, the learning, the habits formed in these first 10 days shape everything that follows. A bird that learns confidence, independence, and proper orientation in the first 10 days has enormous advantage over a bird that experiences stress, confusion, or fear in this critical period. Top fanciers like Leo Harrimans, Joss Stone, and Louis van der Velde understand this completely. They've said repeatedly that they can identify future champions in the first 10 days of training. Not with certainty, genetics and development still matter, but with high probability. The birds that show confidence, intelligence, and proper instinct in the first 10 days almost always develop into good racers if they're healthy and well managed. The birds that show fear, confusion, or poor instinct in the first 10 days almost never become top racers even if their genetics are excellent. This isn't mystical, this is observable behavior that reveals underlying capability. Young birds that orient quickly, learn the loft location rapidly, show confidence exploring their environment, exhibit intelligence in solving simple problems like finding food and water, and demonstrate independence from their parents. These birds have the mental and instinctual characteristics that racing requires. Young birds that remain dependent, fearful of new situations, slow to orient, or confused about their environment, these birds lack the characteristics that racing demands regardless of their physical quality. The first 10 days is when you observe these characteristics emerging and when you begin shaping them through proper management. Let's go through this day by day, hour by hour if necessary, so you understand exactly what should happen, what you should observe, and what decisions you should make. Day 1 through 3 is about loft familiarization and building confidence. This starts the moment young birds leave the nest and become independent. Most young birds are weaned between 25 and 30 days old, depending on development. Some fanciers wean earlier, some later. Ideal weaning happens when the bird is feeding itself reliably and no longer trying to be fed by parents. Forcing weaning too early creates stress and dependency problems. Delaying weaning too long keeps birds immature and dependent. Once weaned, young birds should be moved to a young bird loft or section, separate from breeding birds. This separation is important. Young birds need their own space where they can learn independence without adult birds dominating them or protecting them. In the young bird section, everything is designed for learning. First priority in days 1 through 3 is loft familiarization. Young birds need to learn where everything is. Where is water? Where is food? Where are the perches? Where is the trap that leads outside? Where are the safe spots? All of this learning happens through exploration. Your job is to create an environment that encourages exploration while preventing problems. Keep the environment consistent. Don't rearrange perches. Don't move feeders. Don't change water locations. Consistency allows birds to build mental maps of their environment. Every change forces them to relearn, which delays familiarization. Keep the environment calm and quiet. No visitors, no unnecessary handling, no loud noises or sudden movements. Young birds are naturally cautious. Stress makes them more cautious and slower to explore. Calm environment encourages confidence. Provide food and water in easily accessible locations. Young birds are just learning to find and use feeders and drinkers independently. Make it easy initially. Raised feeders or drinkers that birds have to jump to reach can be added later once basic feeding is established. But in the first days, make everything accessible at ground level or low perch level. Watch for birds that aren't finding food or water. Some young birds adapt immediately. Others struggle. Birds that aren't eating or drinking by the end of day 1 need help. Show them where food and water are by placing them directly in front of feeders and drinkers. Most will figure it out quickly with this help. A bird that still isn't eating or drinking independently by day 2 has a problem. Either too young to have been weaned, health issue, or developmental delay. That bird needs special attention or might need to be returned to parents briefly. The trapdoor should be visible but not yet used. Keep it closed during days 1 through 3. Young birds need to learn the indoor environment completely before you introduce the complexity of outdoor flight. But they should see the trap. They should understand there's an opening to outside. This creates curiosity about what's beyond, which will motivate them when you start letting them out. Some fanciers introduce basket training in the first days. This is wrong. Baskets are for transportation to races, not for loft familiarization. Introducing baskets in the first days adds unnecessary stress and complexity. Birds should learn their loft first. Basket training comes much later, after birds are confident flyers with established loft attachment. Observe behavior carefully during these first 3 days. Which birds are confident, exploring the loft, finding food and water quickly, perching comfortably? Those are showing good instinct and adaptability. Which birds are fearful, hiding in corners, reluctant to move, struggling to find food? Those are showing poor adaptation and might have problems later. Also observe trap discipline instinctively. Even though the trap is closed, watch which birds spend time near it, looking outside, showing curiosity about that route. These birds are already demonstrating the interest in the trap that you'll need for racing. Birds that ignore the trap area might be slower to learn trap entry later. Physical development observation starts now too. Which birds have good feather condition, strong body structure, bright eyes, energetic movement? Those are developing well physically. Which birds show poor feathers, weak structure, dull eyes, lethargic behavior? Those might have health or genetic problems that will limit their racing potential. Don't make final decisions based on 3 days of observation, but begin forming impressions. The birds showing confidence, good physical development, and quick adaptation are priority birds for future training. The birds showing problems are lower priority and might eventually be culled if problems persist. Days 4 through 6 is when you introduce outdoor flying and begin short-distance orientation training. By day 4, young birds should be completely comfortable in the loft, finding food and water automatically, perching normally, showing relaxed behavior. Now you can introduce them to flying outside. First outdoor flying should happen at the loft, not from a release point. Open the trap and let birds exit voluntarily. Don't force them out. Let curiosity and following behavior draw them out naturally. Some birds will exit immediately, others will be cautious and take hours or even days to venture out. That's normal. Don't rush them. When birds do exit, they'll fly around the loft area, exploring their immediate surroundings. Most will stay close initially, landing on the roof or nearby. They're building spatial awareness of what the loft looks like from outside, what the surrounding area looks like, how to recognize their loft from the air. This learning is crucial for future navigation. Let birds fly freely around the loft for 30 to 60 minutes, then call them in using feed or other signals. Most will enter readily because they're hungry or because they're following other birds that are entering. Some might be confused about how to enter through the trap. Those birds need to see the trap entry process multiple times. Keep the trap wide open so entry is obvious. Some fanciers place feed just inside the trap to motivate entry. Birds that won't enter the trap after seeing other birds enter repeatedly might have learning problems or fear issues. Give them time, but note which birds are slow learners. This could indicate problems with intelligence or confidence that will affect racing. By day 5 or 6, birds should be flying voluntarily from the loft, staying out for increasing periods, and entering the trap reliably. The flight distances around the loft will gradually increase as confidence grows. Some birds will range farther exploring the area. Others stay close. Both patterns are normal, but birds that range farther are often showing the exploratory instinct that serves racers well. Now you can begin short-distance tosses. A toss is releasing birds from a location away from the loft so they have to navigate back. The first tosses should be very short, 1 kilometer or less, and they should be in the same direction as your race route. If your races come from the south, toss to the south. If races come from the north, toss to the north. Consistency and direction helps birds learn the race line early. The first toss at 1 kilometer should happen on a clear, calm day. Take the young birds in a basket, drive 1 kilometer in the race direction, and release them. They should be able to see the loft area or at least landmarks they recognize from their loft flying. This isn't testing navigation yet. This is teaching them the direction and building confidence. Most young birds will circle, orient, and fly directly home from 1 kilometer. The flight takes maybe 2 to 5 minutes depending on wind and how directly they fly. When they arrive, observe carefully. Which birds land immediately and enter the trap? Those are showing good loft attachment and trap discipline. Which birds land on the roof and rest before entering? Those are showing less urgency but still acceptable behavior. Which birds fly past the loft, circle around, seem confused about where home is? Those are showing poor orientation and might have navigation problems. Record the arrival order and behavior for every bird. This data is valuable. Birds that return quickly and enter immediately on the first toss usually continue showing that pattern. Birds that are slow or confused on the first toss often remain slow or confused. After the 1 kilometer toss, provide electrolyte water and light feed. Same recovery protocol as after races but adjusted for the short distance. The birds aren't truly stressed by 1 kilometer, but you're teaching them the post-flight routine. Feed after flying, hydrate after flying, rest after flying. This pattern needs to be established early so it becomes automatic. Repeat the 1 kilometer toss from the same direction 2 or 3 more times over days 5 and 6. Each time, observe who improves, who maintains good performance, who shows problems. You're identifying the naturally talented navigators and the birds with discipline problems. Some fanciers toss in multiple directions during early training. This is wrong for racing training. Random direction tosses might build general navigation skills, but they don't teach the race line. Young birds need to learn one direction first, the race direction, and learn it thoroughly before you introduce complexity. Stick to race direction tosses during these critical days. Days 7 through 10 is when you introduce the first real test and begin serious selection decisions. By day 7, young birds have been flying around the loft for several days, have completed multiple 1-kilometer tosses from the race direction, and should be showing clear patterns of ability and behavior. Now you increase the challenge to see how they respond. The day 7 to 10 toss should be 2 to 3 kilometers in the race direction. This is far enough that birds can't see the loft from the release point. They have to navigate using learned direction, landmarks, and instinct. This is real navigation, not just visual homing. The birds that succeed show genuine navigational capability. The birds that struggle reveal limitations. Execute the 2 to 3 kilometer toss on a good weather day. Clear visibility, light wind, comfortable temperature. You're testing navigation ability, not testing birds in difficult conditions yet. Later in training, you'll introduce challenging conditions, but for the first distance test, make conditions favorable. Release the birds and record exact release time, then wait at the loft and record each bird's arrival time. The difference between release and arrival tells you velocity, accounting for distance and conditions. But for young birds on their first real navigation test, velocity isn't as important as completion and behavior. The birds that arrive first, enter the trap immediately, and return to normal behavior quickly, are showing exceptional instinct, confidence, and discipline. These are your priority birds. The birds that arrive within reasonable time, maybe 10 to 20 minutes for 2 to 3 kilometers, and enter the trap within a few minutes, are showing adequate capability. These birds are acceptable for continued training. The birds that take excessive time, more than 30 minutes for 2 to 3 kilometers in good conditions, or that arrive but won't enter the trap, or that don't arrive at all, are showing serious problems. This is your first major selection point. Birds that fail the 2 to 3 kilometer test on first attempt get 1 or 2 more chances. If they continue failing, they're culled from the racing program. Harsh? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. Birds that can't navigate 2 to 3 kilometers reliably at 2 months old will not suddenly develop navigation ability later. The instinct is either present or absent. Testing reveals it, selection acts on it. After the 2 to 3 kilometer test, implement full recovery protocol even though the distance is short. Electrolyte water, recovery feed with flaxseed for anti-inflammatory effect, probiotics for gut health, and 48 hours of quiet rest. You're establishing the pattern that after every flight, recovery happens systematically. The birds learn this routine and begin to expect it, which helps them recover psychologically as well as physically. During days 8 through 10, repeat the 2 to 3 kilometer toss 2 or 3 more times. Observe whether birds improve, maintain performance, or decline. Improvement or maintain good performance confirms these birds have capability. Declining performance suggests the bird is struggling with the distance or the stress and might not develop into a strong racer. Also during days 8 through 10, continue daily loft flying. Birds should be exiting the loft voluntarily every day, flying for 30 to 60 minutes, and entering the trap reliably. This daily routine builds fitness, reinforces loft attachment, and maintains trap discipline. By day 10, you should have clear data on every young bird. Which birds showed immediate confidence in the loft? Which birds learned trap entry quickly? Which birds returned from 1 kilometer rapidly on first toss? Which birds succeeded at 2 to 3 kilometers on first attempt? Which birds show consistent good performance across multiple tosses? The birds that score well across all these measures are your top-tier young birds. These birds get priority in future training and eventual breeding consideration if they continue performing. The birds that struggled in multiple areas, slow loft adaptation, poor trap discipline, slow or failed tosses, are your low-tier birds. These birds are culled or relegated to stock bird status. They don't receive continued racing training, and they definitely don't breed. Keeping and breeding from poor performers dilutes your genetic quality and wastes resources on birds that won't succeed. Now let's discuss what not to do during the first 10 days, because many fanciers create problems through poor management. Don't introduce basket training during loft familiarization. Baskets come later, after loft attachment is absolute. Early basket training creates association between baskets and stress. Before birds understand that baskets lead home, this can create basket aversion that persists. Don't toss in random directions. Your race direction is south, or north, or east, or west. Toss only in that direction during initial training. Random tosses confuse directional learning. Save multi-direction tosses for much later in training after race direction is thoroughly established. Don't toss in bad weather during first 10 days. Difficult conditions test experienced birds. They overwhelm young birds that are just learning. First tosses should be in good conditions, so navigation difficulty comes from distance and novelty, not from weather stress. Don't force birds to fly when they're not ready. If birds are reluctant to exit the trap, don't push them out or scare them out. Let readiness develop naturally through observation of other birds and curiosity. Forced flying creates fear and aversion. Don't neglect observation and record keeping. Every day, watch your birds and note behavior. Which birds are confident? Which are fearful? Which are quick learners? Which are slow? Write it down. This data informs selection decisions. Without records, you're relying on memory, which is unreliable and biased. Don't keep birds that fail early tests hoping they'll improve later. They won't. Navigation instinct, intelligence, confidence. These are largely innate. Training can refine them but can't create them. Birds without these qualities at 2 months old don't develop them at 4 months or 6 months. Cut your losses early and focus resources on birds with demonstrated ability. Don't allow visitors or disruptions during this critical period. Stress impairs learning. Young birds learning their loft and navigation need calm, consistent environment. Visitors create excitement and disruption that interferes with the learning process. Ban visitors during the first 10 days. Your bird's development is more important than socializing. Let's talk about selection criteria in detail, because this is where many fanciers fail to make necessary decisions. By day 10, you should be evaluating every bird on multiple criteria. Trap discipline is critical. A bird that returns from a toss and immediately enters the trap is showing strong loft attachment and good instinct. A bird that returns but sits on the roof for extended periods, or flies away and comes back multiple times before entering, is showing weak loft attachment. Weak loft attachment in young birds usually persists. These birds are more likely to get lost in races or fail to trap quickly, costing you positions. Navigation speed is important but must be evaluated relative to conditions. In good conditions from short distances, birds should return quickly. What's quick? For 1 kilometer, 3 to 5 minutes is excellent. 10 minutes is acceptable. 20 minutes is concerning. For 2 to 3 kilometers, 5 to 10 minutes is excellent. 15 to 20 minutes is acceptable. 30 plus minutes is concerning. These are approximations because wind, terrain, and other factors affect speed, but they give you benchmarks. Recovery behavior matters enormously. After tosses, watch which birds immediately seek food and water. Watch which birds rest but remain alert and responsive. Watch which birds eat enthusiastically. These behaviors indicate good physical resilience and health. Birds that don't eat after tosses, that appear exhausted for extended periods, that show stress indicators like heavy breathing persisting long after arrival, are demonstrating poor physical resilience. These birds might complete short tosses, but they'll struggle with race distances. Physical condition must be evaluated. Which birds maintain excellent feather quality through the training stress? Which birds show bright eyes, good muscle tone, clean vents? Physical quality indicates health and genetic soundness. Birds developing health problems or showing poor physical condition during light training will definitely have problems during heavy racing. Behavioral consistency across multiple days is perhaps the most revealing criterion. A bird that performs well once might have gotten lucky. A bird that performs well 5 times in a row is demonstrating consistent capability. Look for consistency in every measure. Consistent trap discipline, consistent return speed, consistent recovery, consistent physical condition. Consistency proves that ability is real, not random. Use all these criteria together to rank your young birds. The birds that score well on every measure are your stars. Keep them, train them, prioritize them. The birds that score poorly on multiple measures are culls. Remove them from training and breeding consideration. The birds that score well on some measures and poorly on others are your judgment calls. Decide based on which traits matter most to you and how many birds you can train. Most fanciers should be culling 30 to 50% of young birds based on first 10 days performance. If you bred 20 young birds, you should be selecting maybe 10 to 15 for continued training. This feels harsh. You invested in breeding and raising these birds. Culling half feels wasteful, but keeping inferior birds is more wasteful. Resources spent training birds without ability is wasted. Breeding from birds without ability degrades your genetics. Aggressive early culling is efficient and necessary. Now let's discuss the championship perspective on the first 10 days, because the quotes from top fanciers reveal how seriously they take early evaluation. Leo Hermans famously said, "I can see a bird's future in the first 10 days. What did he mean? He meant that the instincts, intelligence, and physical quality that make champions are visible very early if you know what to look for. A bird that shows confidence, quick learning, strong navigation, and good physical resilience in the first 10 days has the foundation for championship performance. A bird lacking these qualities in the first 10 days will not develop them later regardless of training." Louis van der Velde said, "Trap speed matters more than wing quality." This is profound. Many fanciers obsess over physical characteristics, wing shape, eye sign, muscle tone. Van der Velde prioritized behavior, specifically trap discipline. Why? Because racing success requires birds that enter the trap immediately upon return. A bird with perfect wings that sits on the roof for 10 minutes before trapping loses to a bird with average wings that traps immediately. Trap discipline is observable in the first 10 days. Wing quality might predict speed, but trap discipline determines race results. Joe Stone said, if a bird is slow in the first 3 tosses, it will be lost at 300 kilometers. This reflects the principle that navigation ability is innate. Birds that navigate poorly from short distances don't suddenly navigate well from long distances. The complexity increases with distance, so weaknesses become worse, not better. A bird that struggles to find its way from 2 kilometers has no chance at 200 kilometers. Thone culled based on early navigation performance because he understood it predicted long-distance capability. These perspectives from champions should inform your approach. Don't dismiss early performance as just young birds learning. Yes, they're learning, but what they're learning reveals innate capability. Some birds learn instantly because they have strong instinct. Others learn slowly or not at all because they lack instinct. The learning speed in the first 10 days predicts learning speed in all future training and racing. Let's address the question of whether you can rescue birds that perform poorly in the first 10 days. The short answer is rarely. The slightly longer answer is that some birds are late developers, and you might see improvement if you give them more time, but most birds that fail early tests continue failing. You have to decide how much time and resources to invest in marginal birds versus focusing on proven birds. My recommendation is to give birds that fail the day 7 to 10 test 1 or 2 additional chances over the next week. Maybe the bird was sick or conditions were poor, or something interfered with that specific test. A second or third chance allows for variables. But if a bird fails 3 times, it's not variables, it's ability. Cull that bird and focus on birds with demonstrated capability. Some fanciers are reluctant to cull young birds, thinking they might lose a late developing champion. This fear causes them to keep too many marginal birds. Statistically, late developing champions are extremely rare. The vast majority of champions show early indicators of ability. You're far more likely to waste resources on birds that never develop than you are to accidentally cull a future champion. Be aggressive with early selection. Accept that you might rarely cull a bird that could have developed. This is acceptable loss compared to the certain loss of training many birds that won't develop. Now let's discuss adjustments for different climates and conditions. Because the first 10 days protocol needs slight modifications based on your environment. In very hot climates, consider timing tosses for early morning or late evening when temperatures are cooler. Heat stress during early training can create aversion to flying that persists. Make early training comfortable so birds associate flying with positive experience. In very cold climates, delay outdoor flying until temperatures are moderate enough that young birds won't be stressed by cold. Birds develop cold tolerance, but very young birds are vulnerable. Wait for reasonable weather, even if it means extending the first 10 days protocol by a few days. In rainy climates, try to execute tosses on clear days. Rain doesn't prevent pigeons from flying, but it makes navigation more difficult and creates stress. Early tosses should be in optimal conditions. Save difficult conditions training for later when birds have established competence in good conditions. In very urban environments with many predators, especially hawks, consider protecting young birds during initial loft flying by using netting or supervised flights, where you watch for predators and call birds in if threats appear. Losing young birds to predators during first 10 days is devastating both practically and genetically. Protect your birds during this vulnerable period. In rural environments with minimal landmarks, consider making your loft more visible through flags, distinct roof color, or other visual markers that help young birds distinguish their loft from distance. In areas with many similar buildings, loft identification becomes harder. Help your birds by making your loft distinctive. All these environmental adjustments modify implementation but not core principles. The core principles, loft familiarization, confidence building, directional learning, early selection based on performance, apply regardless of environment. Let's talk about nutrition during the first 10 days because diet affects development and performance. Young birds in training need higher protein than adult birds because they're still growing while also exercising. Feed a high-quality young bird mix with 15 to 18% protein. Ensure adequate energy from grains but also enough protein from peas, beans, and if possible, small amounts of peanuts or other protein-rich seeds. Provide calcium and grit continuously. Young birds are still developing bones and need calcium. Grit aids digestion. Both should be freely available. Consider supplementing with vitamins and minerals formulated for young birds in training. B-complex vitamins support energy metabolism. Vitamin E supports muscle recovery. Electrolytes support hydration. Don't over-supplement, but reasonable supplementation during heavy growth and training is beneficial. Ensure absolutely clean water always. Young birds are vulnerable to waterborne diseases. Change water daily minimum, twice daily if possible. Periodically clean drinkers with disinfectant to prevent bacterial buildup. Feed at consistent times. Young birds do well with routine. Feeding at the same time every day creates rhythm and allows you to monitor appetite, which is a health indicator. Birds that don't eat enthusiastically at feeding time might be developing health problems. After tosses, provide electrolyte water for 1 to 2 hours, then switch back to plain water. The electrolytes aid recovery from flying stress. Plain water is sufficient when birds aren't stressed. Finally, let's discuss record keeping during the first 10 days, because documentation is essential for selection. For every bird, record band number, hatch date, parents, and daily observations. Create simple observation categories. Loft adaptation. Rate how quickly the bird learned to find food, water, perches. Trap discipline. Rate how readily the bird exits and enters through the trap. Toss performance. Record return time and behavior from every toss. Physical condition. Note feather quality, energy level, any health concerns. Recovery behavior. Note how quickly the bird returns to normal after tosses. Use a simple rating scale, 1 to 5 or excellent, good, acceptable, poor, very poor. Rate every bird in every category. This creates comparable data that allows you to rank birds objectively. At day 10, review all records and rank all birds. The top 20 to 30% continue intensive training. The middle 40 to 60% continue training at lower priority. The bottom 20 to 30% are culled or relegated to stock status. Update these rankings regularly as training continues. Birds can move up or down based on continued performance, but the initial ranking from the first 10 days is surprisingly predictive. Birds ranked high at day 10 usually remain high throughout their careers. Birds ranked low at day 10 usually don't improve enough to become valuable racers. The first 10 days isn't the complete story of a racing pigeon's development, but it's the critical foundation. Birds that establish confidence, loft attachment, basic navigation, and good physical condition in the first 10 days build on that foundation successfully. Birds that struggle in the first 10 days rarely overcome those early deficits. Your job in the first 10 days is to provide optimal conditions for learning, observe carefully to identify capability, and select ruthlessly based on demonstrated performance. Do this correctly, and you'll enter the racing season with young birds that have the instinct, intelligence, and physical quality to succeed. Do this poorly and you'll waste the season training birds that lack the fundamentals needed for racing success. The first 10 days determines everything. Treat it with the seriousness it deserves. Follow the protocol. Days 1 through 3, loft familiarization. Days 4 through 6, outdoor flying and short tosses. Days 7 through 10, distance test and selection. Observe meticulously. Record everything. Select based on evidence. And build your team from birds that prove themselves from the very beginning. That's how champions approach the first 10 days. That's what separates successful programs from unsuccessful ones. That's what you should implement starting with your next batch of young birds. The protocol is clear. The timeline is defined. The selection criteria are established. Now execution is up to you. Follow this approach and your young birds will develop the foundation they need to become racers. Ignore this approach and you'll wonder why your birds never reach their potential. The first 10 days, the foundation period, the selection window. Make it count.